Hi, I'm Nina. I'm 32, and I never thought my own family would betray me like this. Imagine walking into your house after a long day, only to find your parents and golden child brother inside, planning his wedding in your living room, without even asking you. That moment changed everything for me. Stick with me, because this story isn't just about a wedding. It's about finally standing up after years of being pushed aside. Comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more family drama and emotional courage stories. I'll never forget that Thursday evening. The air outside was sticky and heavy, the kind of late summer heat that makes you want to kick off your shoes the second you step inside and collapse on the couch. I was bone tired from work, keys jingling in my hand, already daydreaming about reheating leftover lasagna, and maybe watching an old movie before bed. My little house was my sanctuary, the one place where I didn't have to answer to anyone. Or so I thought. When I pushed the front door open, I expected silence. Instead, I heard voices, familiar voices, floating down the hallway. My first instinct was that I'd left the TV on, but the words were too sharp, too specific. If we move this sofa out of the way, we could set the buffet table here. My mom's voice carried, clear as day. I froze in the doorway. My pulse quickened, and for a split second, I wondered if I'd lost my mind. Then another voice chimed in, deeper, self-satisfied. My brother Daniel. Yeah, this living room has the perfect lighting. The photographer's going to love it. I stepped fully inside, closing the door behind me a little harder than usual. The sound echoed, but nobody even noticed. There they were, my mom, my dad, and Daniel, standing in the middle of my living room as if they owned it. My dad had a tape measure stretched across the wall, muttering about dimensions. My mom was pointing toward the mantel, explaining where the floral arrangements could go. And Daniel? Well, Daniel was sprawled on my couch, scrolling on his phone with a grin on his face, tossing in the occasional comment like a director giving stage notes. For a moment, I just stood there dumbfounded. This wasn't some surprise visit. This was a full-on takeover. Excuse me, I finally said, my voice sharper than I intended. What exactly are you doing in my house? My mom turned, startled, then forced a smile like I was the intruder. Oh, Nina, good. You're home earlier than we thought. We were just taking a look around. Daniel's wedding is coming up fast and we need to nail down the setup. The setup? I repeated, my voice rising. For what? Daniel smirked without looking up from his phone. The wedding, obviously. This place is perfect for the reception. Tons of space, nice neighborhood, good parking. You should feel honored, sis. Not every house gets to host an event like this. I stared at him, my stomach twisting. Honored? Was he kidding? This was my home. My safe space. And they hadn't even asked. My dad, oblivious or maybe just choosing to ignore the fire in my eyes, stretched the tape measure across the window. If we rent a big enough arch, it'll fit right here. You've got good ceiling height, Nina. Ideal for decorations. Hold on. I cut in, dropping my bag on the floor with a thud. You all just walked into my house and decided it's going to be the wedding venue? Without even talking to me first? Mom waved her hand dismissively, as if I were being dramatic. We knew you wouldn't mind. It's family. And besides, Daniel deserves the best. His wedding is the biggest event this family's had in years. There it was. The golden child logic. Daniel deserved the best. And me? I was just supposed to provide it, no questions asked. I could feel heat rising in my chest, but instead of exploding, I sank into the armchair across from Daniel. I needed to gather my thoughts, or else I'd say something I couldn't take back. Did you even think about asking me? I asked quietly, my voice shaking more than I wanted. Daniel finally looked up, his grin smug. We figured you'd say yes. I mean, come on. It's not like you've got anything else going on here. You live alone, no kids, no husband. Why not put this place to good use? The words stung more than I wanted to admit. Just like that, he'd reduced my entire life to empty space waiting to serve his needs. My mom started fussing with the curtains, ignoring the tension. We'll need to replace these with something lighter. Maybe ivory or blush pink. Don't worry, we'll handle the costs. You won't have to lift a finger. But I knew that wasn't true. If history had taught me anything, It was that "we'll handle it" always turned into me doing the heavy lifting while Daniel basked in the spotlight. I watched as they moved through my house like a crew staging a set. Dad measuring, Mom dictating, Daniel lounging. Not once did they pause to consider my expression, my clenched fists, my silence. To them, my house wasn't mine. It was just another asset to be claimed for Daniel's big day. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Not like a door slamming. More like glass splintering, quiet but permanent. "Stop," I said louder this time. They froze mid-movement. "You can't just decide this without me. This is my home. My space. You don't get to come in here and act like it's yours." For a moment, there was silence. Then my dad chuckled like I'd made a silly joke. "Nina, don't be difficult. This is a family event. Family helps family." That line, "family helps family," hit me like a brick. Where was that motto when I was struggling through college on my own? Where was it when I needed help making rent after my first job barely paid? Where was it on the birthdays they forgot, the holidays I spent alone? Family helps family, but only when it came to Daniel. I stood, the air between us thick with unspoken resentment. If you wanted my help, you should have asked. You don't get to assume. Mom sighed, her patience thinning. "You're overreacting. Daniel has one wedding. Just one. You can spare a few weeks of your life for your brother." Weeks. She didn't even realize what she was saying. This wasn't just about one day. They wanted to turn my entire home upside down for weeks of preparation, hosting, and cleanup. I felt cornered, like a guest in my own life. But at the same time, something inside me stirred, a determination I hadn't felt in years. I took a deep breath, forcing calm into my voice. "We're going to talk about this properly. Right now. Because I am not going to sit back and watch you erase me from my own home." Their faces shifted. Mom annoyed, Dad skeptical, Daniel amused. They weren't used to me standing my ground. Not like this. But as I looked around at the measuring tape, the scribbled notes, the smug grin on my brother's face, I knew this was the beginning of something bigger. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was about every overlooked moment, every dismissed achievement, every quiet sacrifice that had defined my place in this family. And for once, I wasn't going to stay quiet. The room hung in silence after my words. My mom crossed her arms, staring at me with that familiar look of irritation she used when I was little, and asked for something she didn't want to give. My dad scratched the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. And Daniel, of course, leaned back on the couch like this was all some kind of comedy show put on for his amusement. That smirk on his face was gasoline on fire. "Look," Daniel finally said, stretching his arms. "You're making this into a bigger deal than it is. It's just a house, Nina. 4 walls and a roof. It's not like you've done anything special with it. At least this way it'll serve some purpose." I felt my jaw tighten. My home wasn't grand, but every inch of it carried my effort. The second-hand sofa I'd bargained for, the shelves I'd built, the plants I kept alive in sunny corners. Those weren't just things. They were proof of a life I'd built with my own hands. To hear him reduce it all to just a house, reopened a wound I thought I'd learned to live with. The wound of never being enough. "You don't get to decide what's a big deal in my life," I said firmly. My mom rolled her eyes. "Here we go again. Always so sensitive. Nina, can't you just once think about your brother instead of yourself?" The words hit hard, sharper than she realized. Always so sensitive. I'd heard that growing up whenever I tried to defend myself. It was the shield she used to dismiss me, to make me the problem when all I wanted was fairness. The past started bleeding into the present. I was 10 again, standing in the kitchen with a B+ on my math test, excited to show them. But Daniel walked in with a shiny soccer trophy, and suddenly my paper was forgotten on the counter. I was 15, saving money from babysitting to buy my own winter coat, because the new one Daniel wanted had drained the clothing budget. I was 21, graduating college quietly while Daniel's engagement party was a full-blown family event. All those moments, shoved aside, buried under smiles and "don't be dramatic." And here I was 32, still fighting for a voice in a house that was supposed to be mine. My dad finally spoke, his tone calm but firm. "Nina, you're looking at this the wrong way. This wedding is for family. When your brother shines, we all shine. It's about unity. Unity, I repeated, my voice trembling with disbelief. You mean when he shines, you all clap, and when I try to shine, you look the other way. The words slipped out before I could stop them, but I didn't regret it. Daniel laughed under his breath. Oh, come on. Are we really doing this again? The pity party? You've always had this thing about being ignored. Newsflash, sis. Maybe you just weren't that memorable. That one cut deep. He said it casually like a joke, but the sting lingered like salt in an open wound. I stood there, trying to steady my breathing. The living room felt smaller, the air thicker. My throat tightened as if years of swallowed words were trying to force their way out. I looked at the three of them, the family I'd spent my whole life trying to belong to, and I realized this wasn't just about the wedding. It was about every scar they'd left without even noticing. You know what's funny? I said softly. You've spent years telling me family means helping each other. But when I needed help, where were you? My mom frowned. What are you talking about? We've always supported you. No, I said firmly, shaking my head. You supported him. Always him. When I worked double shifts in college just to cover books, did you ever offer to pitch in? When I was sick and couldn't pay my bills, did you check if I needed groceries? But Daniel wants a party, and suddenly it's all hands on deck. That's not support. That's favoritism. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unshakable. My dad sighed, a long weary sound. You're holding on to the past. That's the problem. Life moves on, Nina. Stop living in old grudges. But the truth was, the past hadn't moved on. It lived in me, carried in every look, every dismissal, every forgotten birthday card. The past was alive right now, in the way they stood in my house, assuming it was theirs to use. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his smile smug. Honestly, I don't know why you're making this about you. It's not like you've ever been the type to stand out. You're just bitter because this is my moment and no one's looking at you. My chest burned. For a second, I thought I might cry, but the tears didn't come. Instead, something steadier rose in me, a kind of clarity that had been missing all my life. I looked directly at him. You're right about one thing. This isn't about me. It's about respect. And the three of you have never given me any. Mom's lips tightened. Dad shook his head. Daniel just grinned wider, like he was daring me to keep going. And so I did. You think I'm overreacting? I said. Do you even remember my 16th birthday? No, of course you don't. Because that was the day Daniel had a championship game. And you all drove 3 hours to watch him while I sat at home with a cake I baked for myself. Do you remember when I got my first job offer and called you? You said you were busy helping Daniel move into his new apartment. When I was promoted last year, did you even call? No, you were too busy planning his engagement dinner. Each memory spilled out like water breaking through a dam. Their faces grew tighter, but none of them interrupted me. For once, I had the floor. I've spent my whole life swallowing this, I continued, telling myself maybe next time you'd notice. Maybe next time you'd care. But here we are and nothing's changed. You walk into my home and plan a wedding like I'm just the landlord, not your daughter, not your sister. And I'm done pretending that's okay. The silence that followed was different this time, thicker, heavier. My mom's face flushed red. My dad cleared his throat. Daniel finally set his phone down, though his smirk lingered. You're being dramatic, my mom whispered. No, I said, my voice steady. I'm finally being honest. For a long moment no one moved. The old me would have backed down by now, softened my words, tried to keep the peace. But standing there, I realized peace had never been part of this family. Not for me. I crossed my arms, planting my feet firmly on the rug I'd chosen, in the house I'd built. For the first time, the weight of old wounds didn't feel like a burden I carried alone. It felt like armor. My dad finally broke the silence. We'll talk about this later. But I shook my head. No. We'll talk about it now. Their eyes widened. Not used to my defiance. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Because I knew this wasn't just a fight about a wedding. It was the reckoning of a lifetime of being invisible. And I wasn't going to let it slip away. The silence after my parents left that night clung to me like a damp fog. The house was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. Every corner of the living room seemed to echo with their footsteps, their voices, their judgment. I sat there for a long time, staring at the place where my brother had leaned back so casually on my couch, as though my home had already become his stage. My chest felt heavy, not just with anger, but with something worse, guilt. I kept replaying their words. Family should help family. It wasn't new. It was the same phrase they had used when I was younger, whenever I questioned why all the rules bent in his favor. Back then, I would swallow it whole thinking maybe they were right. Tonight, though, it tasted bitter, and yet I couldn't stop the gnawing thought. Am I being selfish? The guilt came in waves, crashing into me when I tried to stand firm. I thought of my mother's eyes, wide and pleading, her hand clutching my arm as though I was betraying her by refusing. I thought of my father's long sigh, heavy with disappointment, as though I had failed them all over again. And my brother, his smirk, his casual dismissal of my boundaries, cut deeper than I cared to admit. But guilt wasn't the only weight pressing down on me. The pressure began the next morning, in small, calculated ways. It started with a call from my mother. Her voice was too sweet, like honey masking something sour. "Nina," she began, "I didn't sleep last night thinking about what you said. You'll make the right choice, won't you? After all, you've always been the responsible one." That word, responsible, was a chain they loved to tighten around me, as though responsibility meant silence, as though being reliable meant sacrificing myself again and again. I hung up, my throat tight, only for the pressure to come again at noon. This time through a text from my brother. "Hey sis, don't stress. Mom and Dad just want what's best. It'll be fun. The house has enough space. I'll handle the big stuff, you just need to open the doors." I stared at the message for a long time, my hands trembling. Just open the doors. As if my home was nothing more than a building, not the fragile sanctuary I had built piece by piece after years of being overlooked. By evening, the weight of their expectations had burrowed deep inside me. I made dinner, but the food tasted like cardboard. I tried to distract myself with a book, but the words blurred on the page. The pressure wasn't loud, but it was constant, like a dripping faucet you can't fix, drop after drop wearing away at your patience. And then came the silent fights. It wasn't screaming or shouting. No, our family didn't work that way. Ours was a family of closed doors, lowered voices, and words sharpened into subtle knives. The next Sunday, when I visited my parents' house, my father greeted me with a stiff nod. My mother busied herself in the kitchen, moving pots around noisily, her lips pressed into a line. My brother was already there, scrolling on his phone, pretending not to notice the tension. At the table, the fight unfolded without a single raised voice. "So," my father said, spooning rice onto his plate, "your brother's rehearsal dinner is looking for a venue. But of course, no one wants to impose." My mother chimed in, her tone light, but her eyes sharp. "Yes, it's such a shame. With all the beautiful homes in this family, it would be sad if we had to book some cold, impersonal hall." I felt my stomach twist. Every bite of food was hard to swallow. Their silence between words screamed louder than anything else. My brother finally looked up, smirk tugging at the corner of his lips, but he said nothing. He didn't need to. Their weapons were silence and guilt, and he let them wield both on his behalf. That night, when I drove home, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My chest felt heavy with all the words I hadn't said. Why is it always me? Why can't he stand on his own? Why do you see me only when you need something from me? But I knew that saying them out loud would only lead to more sighs, more disappointment, more reminders that I was supposed to be the steady one. The days that followed became a battlefield of unspoken wars. My phone buzzed constantly, messages, subtle hints, and reminders disguised as casual conversation. My mother sent me photos of flower arrangements, captioned, "These would look stunning in your backyard." My father forwarded articles about intimate home weddings being all the rage. Even my brother joined in, sending me a list of potential caterers as though the decision had already been made. Each message was another silent fight. I didn't reply, but my silence carried its own weight. They noticed, I knew they did, because the next time I visited, my mother greeted me with cool politeness instead of warmth. One evening, After another long day of ignoring their messages, I sat in my backyard with a cup of tea. The air was crisp, the sky painted with the fading light of sunset. This was supposed to be my place of peace, but even here, I felt their shadows pressing in. I thought back to when I first bought this house. I had walked through the empty rooms, running my hands along the walls, whispering promises to myself. This was going to be my space, safe, quiet mine. Now, the thought of it being invaded by hundreds of strangers for my brother's big day made my skin crawl. But guilt crept in again, stubborn and relentless. What if I really was being unfair? What if this was my chance to finally do something that would make them proud of me? What if refusing only proved what they'd always implied? That I was too cold, too distant, too unwilling to bend. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake, tossing and turning, torn between the weight of my resentment and the ache of my longing for their approval. The next morning, I woke up to find a note slipped under my door. I recognized my mother's handwriting instantly. Dear Nina, we love you. We know you'll do the right thing. Don't let us down. I stared at those words until my eyes burned. Love wrapped in pressure. Care disguised as chains. The silent fight had found its way into my home, into the very space I had tried so hard to protect. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The guilt was still there, heavy and suffocating. The pressure was still crushing me, and the silent fights were far from over. But beneath it all, a quiet anger began to stir. It wasn't loud, not yet, but it was there, waiting for the moment when I could no longer stay silent. I sat in my car outside the restaurant, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the warm glow spilling out of the windows. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. Tonight was supposed to be a simple rehearsal dinner. Smiles, polite words, maybe a toast or two. But inside me, the quiet anger that had been simmering for weeks pressed against the surface, threatening to spill over. I thought about turning the key, driving away, disappearing for the evening. But then I pictured the note my mother had left under my door, her neat handwriting urging me not to let them down. Those words had dug so deep that no matter how much I wanted to resist, here I was, pulling into a parking space, straightening my dress, and walking inside. The restaurant buzzed with chatter. Families sat at long tables covered in white linen, candles flickering between centerpieces of roses and baby's breath. I spotted them immediately, my parents, my brother, his fiancée, and their friends, gathered at the largest table in the room. My brother caught sight of me and raised his glass in a mock salute, smirking like he'd already won. I forced a small smile and walked over. My mother stood and hugged me, her perfume clinging to my dress, her arms holding me tighter than usual. My father simply nodded, his approval measured in silence. The dinner started harmless enough. Plates of food arrived, glasses clinked, and polite laughter circled the table. But beneath the surface, tension was thick, almost visible, like a storm cloud waiting to burst. Halfway through the meal, my brother stood up and tapped his glass with a spoon. The chatter around us quieted as he grinned at the group. First, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he said, his voice confident, polished. It means the world to us. And of course, I want to thank my amazing sister, Nina, for agreeing to host the wedding at her beautiful home. The room erupted in applause. Glasses lifted. Smiles turned toward me. But I froze. The fork slipped from my hand and clattered against my plate. My stomach dropped like a stone. I hadn't agreed. I hadn't said a single word about hosting. Yet here he was, announcing it as fact, putting me on display like a stage prop. All eyes landed on me. My mother's smile was wide, too wide. My father gave a proud nod, as though I'd finally done something worthy. My brother's fiancée clapped her hands together, beaming. I swallowed hard, heat rising in my cheeks. For a moment, I considered nodding along, letting it slide, burying my anger once again. But something inside me snapped. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the floor. I'm sorry, I said, my voice clear but shaking. I need to correct something. I never agreed to host the wedding at my house. The table went silent. Utensils froze midair. My brother's smirk faltered. What are you talking about? My mother asked quickly, her smile still plastered on but her eyes narrowing. I'm talking about the truth, I said louder now. My voice carried across the table, drawing glances from nearby diners. I never agreed to this. You decided. You assumed. And you've all been pressuring me for weeks. My brother laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Come on, Nina. Don't make this a scene. It's just family. Everyone knows you're the practical one. You can handle it. His words cut deep, but they also fueled the fire inside me. No, I said firmly, my hands trembling but my voice steady. I won't handle it. This is my home, my safe place, and I won't let it be turned into a stage for your wedding. Gasps rippled around the table. My father set his fork down with a clink, his jaw tight. My mother's smile vanished, replaced by a look of sharp disappointment. You're overreacting, she said, her tone clipped. This is what family does. We support each other. You're making it about yourself when it's supposed to be about your brother's happiness. I felt the old guilt creeping in, but this time, I fought it back. I've spent my whole life making things about him, I said, my voice breaking but growing louder. Every birthday, every holiday, every choice, it was always about what he wanted. And now you expect me to hand over my home? No, not this time. My brother slammed his glass down, liquid sloshing over the rim. You've got to be kidding me. This is why no one ever counts on you for anything important. You always think you're the victim. Something inside me snapped again, but not in anger, in clarity. I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. You don't get to call me selfish when I've spent years being the backup plan for this family. You're the golden child. You've always been the golden child. And I'm done being the shadow you step on. The table erupted. My mother hissed my name, begging me to sit down. My father muttered under his breath about embarrassment. My brother rolled his eyes, muttering curses. But I didn't sit. I didn't back down. For the first time, I let the storm break free. I worked for everything I have. I said, my voice cracking with emotion. This house, this life, I built it. And you want to take it, parade it around like it's yours, just because you think you deserve everything handed to you. Well, not anymore. Around us, the restaurant had gone quiet. Strangers watched, forks paused, conversations stalled. But I didn't care. My words weren't for them. They were for the family who had never really seen me. My brother pushed his chair back, standing tall, his face flushed. Fine, he spat. We'll find somewhere else. But don't expect to be part of this family when you can't even do one thing for us. His words hung heavy, but instead of breaking me, they set me free. Maybe that's for the best, I whispered, more to myself than to him. The dinner ended in chaos. My mother left in tears, my father silent with disappointment, my brother storming out with his fiancée trailing behind. I stayed behind, sitting back down at the now empty table, my hands trembling as the adrenaline slowly faded. For the first time in years, I felt both shattered and whole. I had spoken. I had broken the silence. And though the explosion left scars, it also left me standing, finally, truly standing. I sat at that empty restaurant table long after the storm had passed, my untouched plate still in front of me, the candle burning low. My hands trembled against the linen, and though my body felt drained, my mind buzzed with the echo of every word I had unleashed. For the first time in years, I hadn't swallowed my pain. I hadn't smiled through disappointment. I had spoken, and in doing so, I had broken something I knew could never be put back together. The weight of silence around me was both terrifying and freeing. Terrifying, because I could already picture my mother's tears staining her pillow, my father pacing with his disapproving frown, and my brother mocking me behind closed doors. Freeing, because for once, I hadn't bent. I hadn't let them script my life. When the server finally approached, hesitating with the bill, I gave her a tired smile. I'll take it, I said softly, sliding my card across. Paying for the chaos felt symbolic somehow, like I was closing the chapter on years of being their fallback. Driving home, the night air pressed cool against my skin through the cracked window. The streets were quiet, the traffic lights blinking red and green like steady heartbeats. My own heart had steadied, too. Not calm, not yet, but no longer racing with panic. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't drowning under the pressure of their expectations. When I pulled into my driveway, the sight of my home made my chest ache with relief. The porch light glowed warmly, the flower pots I'd planted lying neatly on the steps, the curtains drawn exactly how I liked them. My space. Mine. I sat in the car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, whispering to myself, "You chose yourself tonight. You did it." But the choice wasn't without cost. The next morning, the phone calls began. My mother first. 3 missed calls. Then my father, leaving a terse voicemail. "We need to talk. You embarrassed this family." My brother's text followed shortly after. "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. Not that day, not the next. Each ring of the phone was a reminder of the line I had drawn. Each buzz of a new message reminded me I had stepped out of the role they had written for me. At work, I carried their silence like an invisible weight. Colleagues asked how my weekend had been, and I gave them small smiles, vague answers. No one needed to know that my family had cracked open like porcelain, that I was walking through the shards barefoot. That evening, I poured myself a cup of tea and sat in the backyard, watching the sky turn pink and gold. My phone sat on the table beside me, face down. The guilt still whispered, persistent as ever, but beneath it, another voice grew stronger. The quiet, steady reminder that I deserved peace. 2 days later, my mother showed up unannounced. I heard the knock, then her voice calling my name softly through the door. I hesitated, heart pounding, before finally opening it. She stood there, her eyes red from crying, her hands clutching a folded dish towel like she'd needed something to hold. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice trembling. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, looking around as though the walls themselves might judge her. We sat in the living room, the same place where this nightmare had begun. She spoke first. "You didn't have to humiliate us like that, Nina. You could have just said no privately." I felt the sting of her words, but I held her gaze. "I did say no. Over and over. You just didn't want to hear it." Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, I thought she might argue again. But then her shoulders slumped, and her eyes softened. "You've changed," she whispered, almost to herself. "No," I said quietly. "I've finally stopped changing for everyone else." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't reach for me, and I didn't reach for her. We sat there, 2 women bound by blood but divided by years of unspoken wounds. When she finally left, the air in the house felt lighter, though my chest ached. That night, I journaled for the first time in years. Words poured out of me, anger, grief, but also relief. I wrote about how I had always craved their approval, how every accomplishment of mine had felt hollow because it was never enough compared to my brother's spotlight. I wrote about how exhausted I was from bending, from breaking, from giving up pieces of myself for crumbs of recognition. And I wrote about how I was done. Days passed. The calls slowed. The texts dwindled. The silence grew. At first, it was sharp, cutting into me with every quiet moment. But slowly, it became something else, like a wound beginning to scar. I began to reclaim small joys. I hosted a book club in my living room, laughter filling the space that had nearly been stolen. I planted new flowers in the backyard, each bloom a reminder of growth. I cooked meals just for myself, savoring flavors without the bitterness of someone else's expectations. One Saturday morning, as I watered the plants, my neighbor, Mrs. Green, waved from her porch. "Big plans this weekend," she called. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "Just peace and quiet." Her smile was knowing. "That sounds like freedom to me." And she was right. Freedom wasn't loud. It wasn't a grand declaration or a dramatic exit. It was this, the simple act of living on my own terms. Weeks later, I received an invitation in the mail. My brother's wedding, now set at a country club across town. The envelope was thick, the lettering ornate. My name was printed clearly on the front, but no handwritten note was inside. Just the formal words, the date, the location. I stared at it for a long moment before setting it aside. The old version of me would have agonized over the decision, weighing guilt against exhaustion, longing against resentment. But now, the choice was clear. I didn't need to stand in the back of a room that had never made space for me. I didn't need to smile while swallowing bitterness. That evening, I dropped the RSVP card in the mailbox, the box unchecked. Choosing myself didn't mean I stopped loving them. It didn't mean the ache disappeared overnight. But it did mean that for once, I loved myself enough to draw a line. And as I sat on my porch that night, the cool air wrapping around me, I realized something profound. Approval had always been fleeting, a shifting target I could never hit. But peace? Peace was steady. Peace was mine to claim. For years, I had lived as though my worth depended on their praise, their acceptance, their love. But standing here now, watching the stars scatter across the sky, I knew the truth. My worth had never belonged to them. It had always been mine, and I wasn't giving it away anymore.